Syria becomes the latest country to join China's Belt and Road Initiative. What does it mean for the country's reconstruction efforts after more than a decade of war? Hello, I'm Mike Walter, sitting in for Anna Naidu, and this is The Heat. War-torn Syria has officially joined China's Belt and Road Initiative. The move revives an old role of Syria in the ancient Silk Road, coming at a time of deep economic turmoil and a country badly in need of reconstruction. Attacks on infrastructure, including markets, hospitals, and schools, have led to estimates of more than 350,000 civilians killed and half of the pre-war population displaced. There's a lot to talk about. Let's get straight to our panel. Victor Gao is a current affairs commentator and chair professor at Soochow University. Joshua Landis is a chair professor and the director of the University of Oklahoma's Center for Middle East Studies. Also with us is Adnan Nasser. He's an independent Middle East analyst. And Bassem Abu Abdallah is a former Syrian government official. He currently heads the Ba'ath Party Central School of Syrian. Bassem, why don't I start with you? Give us a sense of the landscape there in Syria. We know it's devastated because of the war. We also know that these economic sanctions are not just affecting the government, they're also affecting average, everyday people in Syria. So give us a sense of what daily life is like there now.
Thank you very much for having me in your program. First of all, I want to mention that the relationship between Damascus and Beijing, it's not a new one. So this move is very important for China from one side and Syria from the other side. For Syria, it's absolutely, we should take into consideration that China used a veto 10 times in the UN Security Council. And it's not just for using veto, it means that it's a political position, attitude from China towards, not only towards Syria, but towards creating a new world order. The One Belt, One Road, I think it's important. Syria is important in the eastern part of Mediterranean Sea. It's a connection between Syria, Iraq, Iran, and it's important in the western part of Asia. The other important thing that China has for reconstruction in Syria, which some sources talking about $400 billion. I think China can help Syria a lot in reconstruction, the country in general, especially that President Bashar al-Assad, in 2019, he said that Syria gave China's government 6 strategic projects in Syria in general. And in the visit of Mr. Wang Yi, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of China, to Damascus, July 2021, I think it was a political sign from one side. The other side that it showed the will of China to engage Syria in the One Belt, One Road. So the mutual interest is important. Besides that, the political principles between two countries is very important. Syria has a mutual interest politically with China. Besides that, China looking to Syria as important partner in the Middle East because after the 10 years of war, I think it's important to have a good partner in the Middle East, especially in the western part of Asia.
Joshua, let me ask you, you're a Middle East scholar, but it's not just because you picked up a few books and read about it. I mean, you've lived it. You lived in the region for more than a decade. You were in Syria for 4 years. You're married to a Syrian. So I'd like to ask maybe the same question of you. I mean, as you look at life in Syria now, you must hear from relatives or friends back there just how difficult the situation is now. What does this mean for the people in Syria?
Well, it's crucial for the Syrians. They're living in very difficult times. With Western sanctions, it's extremely difficult to rebuild the country because most foreign companies don't want to do business and don't dare do business with Syria. And that can be very dangerous. A number of companies have been fined millions of dollars. And we saw what happened with the Chinese company Huawei when the CFO, Meng Wanzhou, was doing business with Iran. The United States had her arrested in Canada, where she was held for a number of years. So it is not easy to do business in Syria, and despite sanctions. And this will be very difficult for Chinese companies to actually do. But it is very important, because today in Syria, most Syrians are getting about 1 hour of electricity a day. It's very disconcerting. It means that companies can't run, schools don't get lighting. There are just many, many problems. And in order to rebuild those electric plants, which are targeted by these U.S. sanctions, it requires participation of foreign companies, foreign investment. An Indian company that was scheduled to rebuild an electric plant in Deir ez-Zor pulled out of the agreement once the Caesar sanctions were imposed, and that meant that they could be sanctioned by the United States. So China's move to engage with Syria is extremely important. It gives a boost in the arm to many Syrians who are hoping that they will be able to rebuild their country and get back to a life that's fairly normal.
Joshua, let me ask you a question about the U.S. And you mentioned the sanctions. It's so interesting. You look back at history, the Marshall Plan, how the U.S. was instrumental in rebuilding Germany after that war, and it created kind of an endearing relationship between Germany and the United States. The sanctions go in a different direction. China now offering this lifeline. What about how this is read in the Middle East, since you're a scholar on that area, in terms of how the U.S. is perceived there?
Well, in many ways, you could make an analogy of China today in the Middle East. It is helping many capitals build their country. The new capital in Egypt is largely being built by Chinese firms. But this is true across the Middle East. And in policy polls done by American firms, the vast majority of Middle Easterners say that their relationship with China is going to be much more important in the future than their relationship with the United States. And we see China really behaving like the United States behaved in the 1950s. In the 50s, the United States had a lot of development money, built many development schemes in the Middle East, helped with dams and so forth. And that annoyed the British tremendously, who were the traditional powers in the Middle East, and saw the United States displacing them. The British doubled down on their military might, things like Suez Crisis and others, and tried to keep control of the Middle East. They failed ultimately. The United States replaced them. Today, China, in some ways, is like the United States in the Middle East in the 1950s. It isn't pushing its way around politically, but it is having a big economic footprint.
Fascinating. Victor, last year, of course, Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited a number of Middle Eastern countries, as well as going to Damascus. That undoubtedly paved the road for the BRI expansion. How do you see this fitting into Beijing's larger mission in the Middle East, would you say?
Well, first of all, China's relations with Syria is very important from the Chinese perspective. We look at Syria as a country with very ancient histories dating back to thousands of years ago, with very traditional, shining civilizations. And also, it has its very unique political system and value system, which may not be the same or identical to many developed countries, but the Syrian people do have their right to explore their own political system, doing their own experiments. Therefore, from the Chinese perspective, we fully respect the Syrian people. We fully respect the political values and system in Syria. We treat Syria as completely a political and strategic equal. And we want to nurture this relationship of partnership, friendship, and to some extent, brothers and sisters relations. And I would say this kind of mutual respect is crucial with other Middle Eastern countries. And China managed to have good relations with almost all the countries in the Middle East, with different cultures, different faiths, different political systems. This is how China approached the rest of the world. We always want to have as many friends as possible. And as far as Syria is concerned, this is a country that needs all the support. And the sanctions you mentioned just now are not endorsed by the United Nations system. It is very much unilateral sanctions imposed by the United States and some other Western countries. From the Chinese perspective, such long-arm overreaching of certain imperialist countries should not be respected. Countries need to have their own right to deal with each other, and they should not be bound by the overreaching of several hegemonistic powers in the world.
Adnan, let me ask you a question. You wrote a piece for the National Interest. You're saying it's very important for Syria, this move to join the Belt and Road Initiative. Here's a quote from your article. It may be the single greatest opportunity for ordinary Syrians to salvage their future prosperity. Can you expand on that?
Yes, the Syrian people for almost now a decade have been suffering over war. They have been they've been thrown out as refugees across the region. Millions have been displaced. There's absolutely no hope for them unless they can manage to find a way to salvage their country. And the only path towards that opportunity would be the Chinese opening up their markets, building on this Belt and Road Initiative. As you know, they have signed a memorandum of understanding earlier this month. And the United States, in my opinion, needs to lift these Caesar Act sanctions now. That's the only path forward to rebuilding their country.
Bassem, you talked about China, Russia, and Iran kind of helping out Syria in this dire time. A lot of countries, though, are taking a kind of a standoff approach to the country. As Victor said, there are unilateral sanctions, but a number of countries say that Syria needs to accept UN Resolution 2254, and that resolution was passed in 2015. It calls for, among other things, fair elections, a new constitution, and credible, inclusive, non-sectarian government. Is that likely, do you think?
I want to mention, first of all, I want to thank you very much, our colleague from China, who talked about the Chinese approach. This is very important because many now talking about a Chinese approach towards Syria or towards other regional states, that China is looking for what they called it debt trap. This is a false and this is a propaganda. But from the Syrian viewpoint, Syria is first of all, is supporting the Constitutional Committee, which is working in Geneva, but in one condition: no interfering in the work in this committee. What we can see now that this committee is not progressing forward. The other important thing that we know that the other parties in this committee, except the national delegation, is getting support from Turkey, from the United States, from Britain. If we want to talk about the future of Syria, I think the Syrian people can decide their future. This is first. The second, when they are talking in the West about the human rights and democracy, which is to sometimes it's very interesting, the history of the United States, starting from Marshall Plan, to some of our colleagues mentioned that, until now, I think they attacked more than 50 states. They attacked the regimes or state electing democratically, and we can give a lot of examples. So what we are looking for in New World Order with China, with Russia, with Iran, with Venezuela, with other states, the Old World Order, all the United States is finished already. We should look for a new world where we can look for our interests. The internal affairs of Syria, only Syria can decide it. Okay, we can accept the 2254, the UN Security Council, but a lot of things changed. First of all, we should combating terrorism. I think China supported Syria and that, besides Russia and Iran, while the United States is supported ISIS until now. Yesterday, 2 days ago, we had a problem in Al-Hasaka. And I think that Turkey is one of the bases for terrorism. So we should, when we are talking about the future of Syria, we should see the dangers of terrorism, the situation, and to leave the Syria to decide their future. This is the position of China, Russia, and other respectable states in general in the world.
Joshua, let me ask you this. You said in an interview once that Syria has very deep differences between its population, and the trouble is it's turned into a terrible proxy war. But you went on later to say that most of the Syrian population will be under Assad's control, but not most of the country. That's an important distinction. Can you elaborate?
Well, most of the country is under Assad's control. About 70% of the country is under Assad's control. There are two other administrations in the northeast, a Kurdish-dominated administration, the autonomous region there, which is American troops are bolstering that. And then there's Idlib province, which is dominated by what used to be al-Nusra, an Islamist group that's supported by Turkey, and northern Aleppo supported by Turkey as well, with Arab militias there. So Syria still dominates 70% of the country and the vast majority of the population. And it's clear that the government in Syria is not going to change dramatically. President Assad has won this war with the help of Russia and the backing of Iran, and he's going to be there. And we already see Arab governments in the region beginning to come back to Damascus. They're asking that Syria be brought back into the Arab League, which might happen this March. We're not sure. There's still opposition from countries like Qatar. The United States is asking Arab countries not to recognize the government in Damascus and to keep it isolated. So there is a struggle going on in the region, and China's adoption, China and Syrian agreement over the Belt and Road is important because it indicates to the regional governments and to the world that there are governments who are going to do business with Syria, and they're going to help Syria rebuild, despite the effort by America and some Western European countries to keep Syria isolated. But it's going to be a difficult struggle because China doesn't really want to undermine the United States in the Middle East. It's cooperated with the United States largely, and has tried to stay out of a direct conflict with the United States. And we'll see how that works, and how far the United States pushes its effort to keep Syria isolated.
You know, that brings up a good question for you, Victor. There's a lot of people looking at this saying Syria joining China and the Belt and Road Initiative. Basically, this is an act of defiance of the U.S. in a sense. Do you expect any type of repercussions?
Well, I think for Syria to become a participating member of the One Belt, One Road initiative is making all the logic and make all the reasons, because Syria is a very important country in that part of the Middle East. It's bordering with the Mediterranean, and it goes up and down, south, north, and to the east, linking with other major Middle Eastern countries. And therefore, for Syria to play a role in this Belt and Road initiative is the logical thing to do. Now, I would say all countries need to oppose foreign attempts to carve Syria into little bits and pieces and try to create their own spheres of influence in Syria, because that's in gross violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria. Now, between China and the United States, we know for sure that the United States is not happy with many things China does, partially because of the failure of the United States and partially because of this uneasiness in Washington that China is really catching up very soon. In less than 10 years' time, the overall size of the Chinese economy will be equal to that of the United States. And by 2050, the overall size of the Chinese economy is expected to be double the size of the United States. Nothing the United States can do can derail the steady rise of the Chinese economy and the gradual strengthening of China's overall strength. This is the megatrend in our world today. And I hope decision makers in Washington will not play with fire, try to do things futile in their nature. It's much better for China and the United States to get along with each other, even though China and the United States do have many differences. We are fundamentally two different countries. We need to get along with each other rather than for the United States try to get to China's jugular, because that attempt, if it's engaged in, will not be successful for the United States.
Adnan, China's also sent vaccines and humanitarian aid to Syria. We're also seeing a number of countries in the region. Joshua pointed this out. You're seeing key Arab states, Jordan, Egypt, and UAE, signing deals with Syria, the Assad government. Let me ask you this. Do you think that this will provide even more countries to actually jump in and help with the rebuild, or are we looking at just a limited number here?
No, I don't believe that. I think you're going to see a lot more countries. Actually, the Minister of Energy, if I'm not mistaken, of Syria and Jordan had met with each other in Beirut to discuss the details of the Egyptian gas pipeline that is going to be sent to Lebanon, which, by the way, received the green light from Washington, including to allow Syria to supply this gas to Lebanon. So in a way, the United States government has accepted Bashar al-Assad is going to remain the president. I don't see why countries around the world should hold on to this myth that any moment now Assad is going to be overthrown if we continue to supply so-called rebel groups with the necessary armaments to do so.
Bassem, when it came to the war, you saw support from Russia and Iran. They obviously have a personal stake in what happens in Syria. Now you have China coming in with the Belt and Road Initiative. Is this going to be where all these countries can work in a cooperative manner? Will it create some tensions or frictions? How do you see that unfolding?
I want to mention two important things very fast. The first of all, the future of Syria, as I mentioned, the Syrian people would decide. But China, when the Chinese government supported Syria, China didn't support a person. They didn't support President Bashar al-Assad, but they are supporting or talking to President Bashar al-Assad as a legal president, if the United States want that or not. Now the situation is more stable in Syria. The economic situation is very bad, absolutely, because of the sanctions. But we are looking for the cooperation with Iran, with Russia, with China, with other states. But China, why it's important, and this initiative is very important for Syria, because China has money, big money. The second, China has a technology. The third important factor, that China has no political agenda like the Western states, unfortunately, like the United States, where they are talking about many political conditions under the economic assistance. Here, China is looking for a real cooperation. I think that United States is trying to cut the western part of Asia for the One Belt, One Road. The Chinese troops now in the northeast of Syria, in At-Tanif, they want to cut the road between Damascus, Baghdad, then Tehran. But I don't think that United States can continue like that. They should change this strategy, because China is uprising. China is in need for not only for Syria, for many states in the region. It doesn't matter here the political regimes or political systems or small or big states. China is looking for a win-win situation with all states. So I think that China is important, besides absolutely Russia and Iran and other states. Syria didn't close windows with the West generally and historically, but the West with the last war, I think they try to cut or to disturb the One Belt, One Road. So the war in Syria, it's not only with the president or with the regime, it was with China and Russia, and it was with the New World Order. This is a very important point which we should mention all the time. Because of that, I think Syria is an important part of the One Belt, One Road, and I think it's the future not for only Syria, for Jordan, for Lebanon, and for Iraq, for Iran, for others. So it's open for dialogue and for cooperation and for the interests of all states in the region.
Joshua, The Guardian wrote a piece in which they cited analysts and diplomats both as saying even in relative calm, Syria is going to offer poor returns for years to come for China. They say Syria is a poor investment for Beijing. I want to get your thoughts on that because it's kind of, they're saying, you know, what's in it for Beijing?
Well, Beijing there's a lot in it for Beijing. First of all, I don't think it's clearly investing in Syria has a lot of risks today. Syria is extremely poor, and it's going to take some time for it to get back on its feet. But the countries that help Syria rebuild its economy, I think are going to be in a very good position in the future. By taking a very short-term view and just saying how much money can we make next year, I think defeats the entire purpose of investing in Syria. If China builds these relationships, much the way the United States built relationships in the Persian Gulf by helping Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the UAE develop banking systems and build their infrastructure and roads and buildings, that relationship has endured. And China, by building a relationship with Syria today, will be building the foundations for a future position in the Middle East. And that's why people in Washington, I think, are saying, oh, they're not going to get it. They're trying to pour cold water on this because precisely for those reasons. And they don't want to see China, Russia, and other countries gaining a large position in Syria, which is very strategically located at the heart of the Middle East.
Victor, briefly, is China playing the long game? Is that what this is all about?
Absolutely. I think in dealing with countries like Syria, as well as with almost all the other countries, you need to have a long-term strategy. You do not expect to make money or recover all your investments overnight. I think by dealing with these countries with full respect, respecting their territorial integrity and sovereignty, treating their countrymen as brothers and sisters on equal basis, will generate long-term benefit, both for China as well as for Syrians. After all, we respect Syria as a very ancient country with glorious civilization behind it, and we truly believe that the Syrians, once they can get focused on economic development and building up their stability, will have great, glorious futures in the future. China wants to be part of their glorious future, and making investments even at difficult time with great risks is the right thing for China to do.
And we are going to leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Great discussion. Really appreciate it. And that is going to do it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Mike Walter in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for watching.
Modern vitality, born of ancient civilization.